Hello, you're watching Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. I'm Young. South Korea on Wednesday announced the full details of the country's first ever unified foreign policy for the Indo-Pacific region. And Seoul's Indo-Pacific strategy comes as part of its vision to become a global pivotal state that plays an important role in world affairs while also strengthening its economic security. Now, both goals have been challenging for the region, which has also seen growing instability due to geopolitical rivalry, among various other factors, and featuring the most important sea lines for global trade and some of the most contested territories across the expansive bodies of water. Protecting freedom, peace and prosperity requires a maritime course of action. To discuss this, we're joined by Dr. Jihoon, Commander of the Republic of Korea Navy and Research Fellow at Korea Institute for Defense Analyses. We're also joined by Terence Roeg. He is a professor of national security affairs at the U.S. Naval War College, who has authored several books on South Korea's place in the world, including his latest, The Evolution of the South Korea-U.S. Alliance. Very warm welcome to you both. Thank you very much for joining us. And, well, my first question to you, Commander Yu. Now, we had this release of South Korea's own Indo-Pacific strategy. And, well, really, how important is the freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific to South Korea's way of life here, as well as its economic security?
Well, South Korea has a critical interest in freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific. First, the rigorous alliance is vital to South Korea's ability to deter North Korea. The U.S. ability to reliably support South Korea in the event of a conflict with North Korea hinges on the U.S. being able to operate freely in seas and airways of the West Pacific. Second, South Korea's economy depends on free and open access to maritime shipping. The bulk of South Korea's energy is imported from the Persian Gulf and travels along sea lanes running through the Indian Ocean and South China Sea. If South Korea's ability to access these sea lanes was constricted, Koreans' way of life would suffer considerably.
And now we turn to you, Professor Roeg. Now, why are countries really rushing to expand their maritime presence in the Indo-Pacific, especially amid this U.S. China rivalry that we're seeing? What kind of challenges are these countries facing?
Well, I think when you look at this, I mean, the region is, at its core, is a maritime region. And so many of the states have important maritime interests at stake, the free flow of commerce, the ability to export their manufactured goods, but also the ability to be able to import raw materials. Those things are very important. I think it's also important to recognize that for some countries, for many countries that are in the maritime zone, that it is about protecting their fishing resources from illegal and unregulated fishing. And so that's an important maritime interest that is also having states increase their maritime capabilities. Certainly, there are also a number of states that have maritime disputes that are part of the overall security environment, and states seeking to assert those claims, protect their interests, et cetera. That's an important part of it. And lastly, as your question indicated, that there is also in the context of this, the growing U.S. China competition that is part of the region. As China seeks to diminish the United States' presence and influence in the region, and the United States works very hard to make sure that that doesn't happen so that it maintains its position in the region.
I see. And Commander Yu, well, there are a couple of Indo-Pacific strategies out, and South Korea is quite late, actually, but as it's late, it has the privilege of, I guess, boosting other countries' strategies as well. And how can the ROK Navy as well really enhance the synergy between other countries' Indo-Pacific strategies?
Well, first, South Korea should continue bolstering its blue water neighbor capabilities in order to augment its capacity to work with the U.S., UK, France, and other relevant powers in order to deter threats to Indo-Pacific maritime security. Second, South Korea should continue to expand its participation in neighbor exercises beyond the waters of the East and West Seas, alongside the United States and other key regional and extra-regional states, in order to enhance its ability to operate as a part of maritime coalitions to advance its interest. These exercises could involve a range of relevant operations, including ISR resupply, slug protections, and mine-sweeping, amphibious operations, and anti-submarine warfare. Third, if threats to freedom of navigation continue to grow more severe, South Korea might consider beginning to participate in freedom of navigation operations, working with the U.S., UK, or others to demonstrate its commitment to freedom of the seas. Finally, South Korea should seek a permanent seat at the table in the quadrilateral dialogue established by the U.S., Australia, India, and Japan to discuss shared goals and opportunities for coordinations in the Indo-Pacific.
I see. And Professor Arirang, now, what role do liberal democracies hope to see South Korea play in order to enhance maritime security in the Indo-Pacific?
Well, I think, as has been noted already, that there are, first and foremost, the the Indo-Pacific strategy that just came out aligns South Korea very clearly and publicly with the goals, as the title of the document indicates, that it is about a free, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific. And so this is very good news that South Korea is very publicly, firmly aligned with other states that are, as the line goes, like-minded states with these same interests in the region. And so I think it is very important and very welcome that South Korea now adds to this global coalition, if you will, that is crafting this response, and adds to the political as well as the operational strength of those like-minded states that wish to see and maintain a free, open, and peaceful Asia-Pacific region.
I see. And Commander Yu, now, in what ways do you think South Korea's naval presence in the Indo-Pacific can really uniquely contribute to regional stability amid all the sources of instability that we're seeing?
Well, South Korea is poised to be the linchpin of the regional security and stability, given its strategic locations amidst the Indo-Pacific Maritime Commons, its formidable shipping capabilities, which is one of the finest in the world, and its growing naval capabilities and its robust partnerships with the United States. All of these advantages can be leveraged by South Korea to advance its maritime interest and contribute to regional stabilities. Deterrence and a favorable balance of power are vital to this regional stability. If a potential challenger comes to believe that it has a reasonable chance of ending the regional status quo through aggressions, then regional stability will break down and South Korea's interests will suffer. As such, South Korea must leverage its advantages to ensure that potential threats are held in check, contributing to counterbalancing efforts if necessary.
I see. And in that regard, Commander Yi, what are some priorities that South Korea must set forth in order to increase its blue water capabilities?
South Korean Navy has undertaken a host of projects to enhance its blue water capabilities. It has acquired a new generation of advanced destroyers designed for blue water missions. In particular, the KIDA Sejong the Great class, equipped with Aegis combat systems and guided missiles. South Korean Navy is also planning to deploy a new generation of Aegis destroyer, which is bigger and stronger in size and capability. The first ship, Jeongjo Daewang, was launched last July. South Korean Navy would also benefit from developing light aircraft carriers, the highly debated CVX program. A carrier strike group with appropriate logistical support would help South Korea contribute to the protection of key shipping lanes in the Indo-Pacific. It would be especially useful as part of coalition efforts. In this capacity, it could engage in strike and counter-air operations to maintain sea control alongside the U.S. or other partners. South Korean Navy should also continue to look into other improvements, developing nuclear propulsion for the next batch of KSS-3 submarines, for example, would enhance the South Korean Navy's ability to project power into the South China Sea and Indian Oceans. Developing stronger relations with the key leader states in South Asia and Southeast Asia like India or Vietnam could also improve South Korea's ability to project power.
I see. And Professor Arirang, how do you see this? How vital do you think it is for South Korea to increase its aircraft carrier and also nuclear submarine technologies?
Well, I think that is something that is an important debate and discussion to have. Both of these platforms are going to add to South Korea's naval capabilities, but there's always a question about budgets and priorities, as these things are very costly programs, and South Korea has many other security priorities that are part of the mix. But with that said, I tend to lean more towards if it is about making a choice between those two, I tend to think that the aircraft carrier is the more important of the platform at this particular point in time. If there is going to be conflict on the Korean Peninsula, it's very likely that the airfields are going to be hit first, and the aircraft carriers provide some degree of flexibility for South Korean air power. I think the funding spent for a nuclear powered submarine, while again that does have benefits, I think might be able to achieve more capability by spending it on an increased number of diesel submarines as opposed to a more limited number of nuclear powered submarines. But of course, that's a debate that South Korean naval and security analysts are continuing to have.
And we're lucky to have one in studio with us today. And well, the greatest security challenge South Korea faces is, of course, North Korea, as we've seen in recent days. And Commander Yu, now, when it comes to countering increasing threats from North Korea's submarines as well, what kind of capabilities are needed here in the South? How has the Navy also been developing its capabilities?
Yeah, there are two distinct threats posed by North Korea's submarine forces. The first is the conventional threat posed to South Korea's fleet and shipping by North Korean attack and midget submarines. As was demonstrated by the attack on South Korean Navy's Kalbi Cheonan in 2010, these North Korean submarines can still pose a threat to South Korea's interest and security. The second is the nuclear threat posed by North Korea's pursuit of a ballistic missile submarine. As North Korea enhances its ability to launch nuclear-armed missiles from its Sinpo-class submarine, it will be better able to evade the existing defensive systems of South Korea and the United States. South Korean Navy must work to counteract both of these threats. Some of the steps South Korean Navy has taken include the acquisition of a larger attack submarine with a greater endurance, capable of hunting and destroying North Korea's attack and midget submarines. South Korea's KSS-3 Dosan Anchangho-class submarine includes an air-independent propulsion systems that expands their endurance, their ability to operate for longer durations, hunting North Korean submarines while they are submerged.
I see. And well, in the interest of South Korea's national security and its role in the region and also globally, we hope to see more and more naval capabilities built up in the years to come. And this is where we have to wrap up the interview today. That was Dr. Jihoon, Commander of the ROK Navy, and Terence Arirang, Professor of National Security Affairs at the U.S. Naval War College. Thank you both very much for your time this morning.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Also, thank you very much to our viewers for tuning in. Global Insight will be back on Monday here in South Korea. Do tune in then. Have a lovely weekend and Happy New Year wherever you are. Goodbye.